So, Revit to 3ds Max. So, the title of this is Physically Accurate Lighting with Revit and 3D Studio Max, because you can do physically accurate lighting in both. As Bill introduced us, I represent PACIFICAD. I'm a senior technical specialist there. This is just an outline of some of the things that I'll be talking about. And this is the outline I use when I do this, my workshops and my classes. And I won't go through all of this, but basically, because I come from the industry, this outline and the way I teach 3D Studio Max is broken down to 3 phases of conceptual, schematic, and design, which is probably very similar to you guys in the architectural field. Some samples of my work. I'm going to turn this on because I like to walk around. Can you guys hear me still? How's that? Perfect. Yeah, I'm a walker and a talker. So here are some examples of my work. We've got towers, we've got downtowns. Now, let's look at this image right here. Any buildings computer generated in there? And I want somebody to guess for me. I'm going to make somebody guess. This one on the far left? Absolutely. Let's get the laser. That guy's fake. What about this one? That one's not real either. That's fake. Are these real? Anything in here? No? Yes, these are all real. All in here. The only other fake building is right here. I thought this would be the first one. That's a big one. I mean, this is a good guess, too. Was it the glass and some of the reflections? Yeah. Yeah, a little too shiny there. Oh, yeah, look at that sidewalk. That's a little too cute. That's a little too cute. So this is just an example. I mean, I got here and I see this town's booming. This is a great product for this town right now. I think with all the buildings that you have going up, this is something where we just take an aerial photography and in 3D Studio Max we match this stuff up. Some more examples of work. I've specialized in interiors, but these are all different types, exteriors, and you see the different challenges that occur. Exteriors, obviously, landscaping is always a big challenge. Okay, now this is what I like to get into. Because this is not just portfolios, right? We look on the web and we see all these cool images these days, but how do we work? That's the question. I mean, you bring somebody, say you're going to get an artist into your firm, you're going to set them up with some equipment, and you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to go out and get what, like a Box Technologies, render machine, right, or something, a couple of dual monitors. And this usually happens to me, and then I realize, hey, you know what? I probably need like 3 monitors. Seriously. I mean, look, this is how I was working last year. And you know how you guys like to pull your Revit menus off to your second screen? Well, where's my Revit menus going? And then where are my 3D Studio Max menus going? So you can see I'm working on this project here, but my screen's kind of covered up. But this is how I work. It's really important that I've got my link here between Max and Revit, and I've got them both on my screen. I was an intern architect, so I'm not just doing renderings. I mean, I've got to do details and sections and everything else, and somebody's still asking me, hey, by the way, when's that section done and when's the rendering done? I got involved with beta testing with NVIDIA last year, and as you walked through the door, maybe you saw my prize babies over there that my kids think I'm like crazy. Like, what are you, I mean, your dad, you've just been staring at that thing, or you're taking them in and out of machines all day. And the great thing there are a couple of good things about beta testing. And, in your office, you have to decide if you have the time, if you have the personnel. But the great thing is it keeps you on cutting edge. And what you'll see coming through the pipeline and rendering, the future is all about GPU. It's all going to be rendered on video cards or in the cloud. And in this example, those cards over there are somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 worth of video cards that I had loaded in one machine as I was doing this testing for NVIDIA. And some of these renderings, like the one on the cover of that article, was done in Revit in real time. And I could move the camera around and that thing would just re-render. Probably took 5 minutes per rendering. But that comes with a cost. I did say about $15,000 worth of video cards. Now, you can, just as a heads up, you can use gaming cards, and they'll tell you you have to use Quadro cards, but I disagree. I've had all kinds of gaming cards, and they work just as good for much cheaper. Let's talk about, again, what type of products are we going to produce out of your office? I like to show this one because I was working at a studio where we just did work for home builders. And these are two different groups that we had and two different products that we sold. Huge price difference. This product on the right, we also did work for Whirlpool. This is very similar to the shots that we did for Whirlpool. They were ad shots for Whirlpool. Whirlpool paid probably $8,000 for those shots. They said it saved them a great deal of cost. It was costing them $40,000 to do a real photo shoot. So when they said that, when we told them we can do it for $8,000, they did backflips. They were super excited. Home builder, on the other hand, similar kitchen. If we told them over $1,000, they would scream and, no, that's way too expensive. So we did, those are, so you cannot really get the same level of detail without putting in the same amount of time into the shot. And obviously the shot on the right takes a lot more time, set up, a lot more accessories in the shot, different levels of lighting, interior and daylight going on. This is a process, this is extremely important. These are these 3 stages I was talking about, right? I mean, and this happens in every industry. And that's why we really have to, you don't rewrite stuff necessarily, right, all the time. I mean, sometimes we've got Pixar, we've got Disney. I mean, you can follow leads. We've got the car industry. And this is how they work, from sketches in schematic phase or the digital sketch in the early design phase. Then they move to conceptual models or design development, which would be, our second phase. And then construction documents or the design model or the final shot in the movie. These things have to go through quality assurance. When I was doing those kitchen shots, we don't just hand them to the clients, they get reviewed. There's a process, there's a workflow. And so you have to make sure you have the capabilities in-house, the roles set up. And it's not a bad idea to educate your clients before you deliver stuff to them that you're not going to get the final rendering on our first meeting. It's just going to be some sketch out of Revit, some hidden line with a little sketchy line, something. And we all know, gosh, if you showed a wood floor in the first meeting, the whole meeting would be stuck on that wood floor. We would never make it to the second room, right? So that's why I tell lots of architects, let's do gray shaded stuff and, kind of show these Revit sketches. And here again, how you do it in Revit. I think you guys all probably familiar with that as users. This is an important slide to me. And Lana jumped right to the end and said something about Stingray. I was like, whoa, you don't think I'm going to show Stingray today, dude? I mean, Stingray is awesome. And I'm familiar with a lot of these products. I don't have production experience in Stingray and game development, but I'm doing a lot of research on it right now. I obviously have a lot of experience on this workflow outside of the gaming part. Now, what this workflow is it has to be multi-directional, right? So in all essence, it really starts on the left here and moves right. So we see the rendering in green on the right. That's going to be our deliverable. But because of our clients and what changes, we have to be able to be working multi-directionally, right? We may get all the way to 3D Studio Max from some textures we got in Photoshop through Revit. We made a model, parametric model. It gets shipped over to 3D Studio Max. We started rendering. The client saw it and said, oh, I want to move this wall. So I've got to be able to now go, like my red arrows between Revit and Max, I've got to be able to go back to Revit, make the wall change, and then come back into Max. There's a dynamic link. Hint, I don't use the RBT file. Out of Revit, and I'll show you a video here shortly where I just use an FBX. There's some reasons for that. It's much more stable still at this point. They're telling you, yes, you can, Autodesk says you can use your Revit file and go back and forth, but there's some advanced techniques in 3D Studio Max that are not very compatible with how the RBT file comes over. In other words, it takes this wall here and splits it in like 4 pieces. And so when I start to try to paint that wall in Photoshop, it's very difficult. The FBX will just make this one solid rectangle. I can export that rectangle to Photoshop, and I can paint anything I want in the world on that wall. And in real time, as I save in Photoshop, it saves right back to 3D Studio Max. And I think that arrow, I might have missed that arrow, so be careful. There should be another arrow, I think, from Photoshop to Max. So, I mean, I saw somebody take a photo of this. I mean, I think at some point we'll have this somewhere that you guys can really look. But you need somebody to guide you through this stuff, okay? And that's some of what I'm going to be talking about here in a second. Reference, super important. Some of the best studios that I know that do architectural rendering in the country really put a high focus on reference. In other words, when you're talking with your clients, you know, I think you guys always give them reference. Hey, what kind of house are you looking for, right? And they do their research, and they come back with their magazines and their books, and they're all happy. Renderings happen the same way. Before we actually do some rendering or animation, we kind of start talking to the client, and we get to some place where, hey, these are our expectations. How do you make it through all this is what I was saying I was going to get to. All these tools that are out there. I know one you've all heard of is V-Ray, right? Did you know that my last job, accept a job. Greg, what tools do we need? We're talking back and forth daily. One day he calls me, hey, I just bought V-Ray. I said, oh, okay. That's cool. I mean, you didn't have to run out and do that, though. But then I get there and we say, well, we're coming from Revit right to Max. I said, okay, well, you know that every single object in this Revit scene I'm going to have to go into and change to a V-Ray material? Do you know what kind of time this takes? You know how many materials are just on, you know, a desk or a chair in your scene? So now you have somebody sitting there for days just changing materials. I found a script that did work. There's one script out there, and I think I talk about it here when I go from Autodesk Materials to Arc Design V-Ray script. That's the only way to do that process. But again, you know, don't just go by what you hear. V-Ray is a great tool. I've used it in production. I think some of those kitchen shots were done in V-Ray, but not necessary. iRay and some of the tools that come right with 3D Studio Max do the same exact thing. You know, V-Ray is very popular, and it's a great tool, but not necessary. What is necessary if you want to create really high detailed shots is content. And, you know, LOD and LOD, I was talking to Bill about this the other day. Very interesting. In my world, you guys have, does anybody know what LOD is in your world? Level of detail or development? I believe it's level of development, and level of detail is a subcategory of level of development as it's defined in the BIM standard something. In our world, LOD only means level of detail. And when I saw LOD, I got back into architecture because I bounced back and forth. I came back and somebody was saying LOD is level of detail. Because as the camera, like these trees, all that geometry, we have to come up with a way so that as the camera moves further back away from those trees, we shut off the twigs. Those things don't render. We don't need the geometry of a twig. We can't see a twig from here. You know, and so we have these special tools in Max. And so see, these are some of the things that when you're talking about rendering in Revit or 3D Studio Max, why do I need 3D Studio Max? These are things you could not do in Revit. I could not tell Revit to, hey, make the twigs disappear when I get 100 feet from that tree. That's why movies and all these things, they have all these tricks in 3D Studio Max to do these things. But it's very important as architects. I think we already have a great way of getting our own content, and we're being helped by who? Manufacturers. And I believe this is really a great way to go. See if you can start building your libraries and, you know, to help you spec, make schedules. I mean, I did a library for the last architect I worked for lighting fixtures, and of course those lighting fixtures, of course I made them work for my renderings, which is most important to me, but also they had to work for our schedules and specifying quantities, all these types of things. And it was great to just download them from manufacturers, make sure all the correct information's in there, and do all this stuff, and automate so many tasks. You know, like I said, from running schedules to creating a rendering, that's a great thing to be able to have libraries that can do that for you. And here again, that just shows, you know, how we get those objects from the web, just a little graph of that. Let's jump into that. Okay, so here I just have a small little, I knew that. I've learned over time that the more simple the little piece of technology, the more difficult it is for me. Like when I start a job and they give me, you know, the $4,000 box computer and all the software with all the buttons, I'm like, awesome. And then they put that phone on my desk with those 5 buttons, and I'm like, oh my God, how do you work this thing? So I'm sorry. All right. So we want to be efficient. We really stress workflow. Okay, and so here's another workflow thing. I'm in Revit. Here's this small little scene. This ships with Revit. I just placed some different furniture in there. But what we're talking about here, I have a little black, I have like a, that's like video card or something. Let's see if that'll go away. That was weird, right? That was a little video card. See, video card's super important. I love glitches and stuff like that. Like there was this big, and it's gone now. But that's the difference in why am I paying so much for this video card? I mean, you really have to think about these things. If you're going to have somebody that's got graphically intensive stuff going on, he may have stared or she may stare at that black box for like 15 minutes and every 4 days. And over the course of a year, we should have got them a better video card. But my video card's great, though. That was just a little glitch. Okay, so here's real-time lighting stuff, all right? So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to select this light in my scene, right-click, select all instances, visible in view. Shows up in my properties dialog box, right? Let's see what it looks like in a different light. Downloaded some of these from a manufacturer yesterday. I click on a different one. Boom, real time. Now, that's just a small little thing. And of course, we can go through all the different variations of color, temperature, a different light. I got a round one in here. That one's a little small little spot. The round one looks pretty cool. Oops. Gotta move that. Oh, here we go, sorry. Looking in 2 places at once. Revit, got to move that cursor off that properties dialog box or nothing's going to come. Okay, so I mean it's not super great and it's dark for a reason and all those things. You'll see the rendering in a second here. But we get to see a lot of basic things on how this light is washing the wall. And we can make decisions there before we render. That's all I wanted to really point out there. And this rendering, I'm going to let go for a second here. And that's always dangerous, right, to like render live, but we're going to render. I'm one of those guys, I try to break stuff even in live demos. I'll just pop open like 8 different programs and just let it go. Okay, here's what I want to talk about with this guy in just 2 seconds here. They're back to workflow process. So I showed that you can get some visual feedback just in your viewport, so think about your video cards, right, because we can make a lot more decisions in lighting and all of that stuff. And the difference here, though, is we have to think, all right, this person has got multiple tasks, most likely in an architectural office. They're also doing details and things like I was. And so the first time this happens to me, I'm working on details and this and that, and oh, let's shoot off a render. Okay, what do you think I'm doing right now? Sitting. Nothing. This is bad, right? This is bad. And I can't tell you how many offices I've gone into like, woo, first day, yeah, this isn't going to work. Why? Hey, man, I saw your portfolio. It looked awesome. It's like, yeah, I didn't do it like this. I mean, because I couldn't get any work done. So what we do is I'm going to go back. The challenging part now, not running Revit and renderings, but running the presentation. Okay. Is that, well, I'm going to let that thing render for a second in the background. It's a black screen, okay? And Not really an effective way. There's got to be a way to push stuff off. Oh, I'm talking too much, sorry. There's got to be a way to push stuff off to your network so that you can continue rendering. Okay? Yeah, let's see how this is going to go. Yep, he's still thinking, so we're going to let him go for a second. I'm going to jump on to why we do grayscale renderings. Okay? Now, this is what we were talking about before in our first meetings. You know, early meetings with clients, we don't want to distract them by wood floors and all those things. This is a great, great tool, and it's used by all the industries. All movies and lighting, for whether they're real action, live action shots and have real blue screenings and characters, real people, or they're just totally CG, they're all lit, the sets, in grayscale, so that this is how lighting techs really can, really see their light, shadow, contrast levels. As we see in the bottom left here, this one is the same shot. These are both the same shot here, and if in the back you probably can't even see what this thing is. It's just kind of all lumped together. Same shot, higher contrast. A lot of times these things can be solved in Photoshop, though. Keep that in mind. Photoshop, extremely powerful tool. Or if you don't want to pay for Photoshop, get GIMP, G-I-M-P. It's a free tool used by lots of movie studios and all that stuff. They use it as much as they use Photoshop, and it's absolutely 100% free. Oops. Lost my mouse. There's my mouse. Come back, mouse. Well, where's my mouse? Sorry. Oh, Revit's making me lose my mouse. I'm sorry. All right, and our Revit rendering is done. So we'll take a look at that. There's my mouse came back. Yeah. There's another graphics issue. I don't care. I mean, it's good that you see it. Because maybe you don't see the people in your office work that much. But when I started rendering Revit, I was trying to move to the next slide, but I lost my mouse because this was using all of my CPU's processors. Once again, Revit, I told you where the future was, right? GPU. I told you I did some stuff for NVIDIA with iRay in Revit. But at this point in time, on this release, we can only render with the CPU, which halts almost every other operation on my computer. These renderings are CPU hogs. So it was a 4-minute rendering. It was fine. He looks at it, or she looks at it and says, oh, well, I should have used that other light. And so how many times are we going to go through that process, And just think, so you say, why do renderings take so long? It's not, it was a 4-minute render time, but we can see this process going on over and over again. And, next thing you know, it's lunch and an hour and a half lunch. And by the end of the day, this person's got really nothing done. It helped by having some good content that we could switch the lights quickly and they could make some decisions, but they could be more effective, okay? And how? Let's talk about how they could be more effective. Oops, wrong slideshow. I should just stick in 3D stuff all the time. All right, there we go. And I lost this slide. So this slide, again, is about how do we set these models all gray. It is a second challenge. This is another little trick. This is a Revit trick, and maybe somebody knows the answer to this question. I've got a Revit file. We brought in all this content from our libraries. You know all the furniture and all the walls already have materials loaded on them, right? And I was just talking about we have to start lighting this thing in grayscale because we don't want to show the client any materials anyway. So this happened to me too. Here's my first, we got a client coming in, Greg, yeah, let's make it all gray. I could bring it into Max and do this really quickly, but I wanted to render it out of Revit. So does anybody know how you can put an override on the whole? I think I probably have it on the screen, so you're cheating, but it's phases. Do I have it on the screen? It's phases, though. Phases is a way in Revit that you can go in, and I just applied a gray shaded material over everything in that phase. And of course, you set the viewport to some new, I created some new phase, set the viewport to that new phase, and say override, you know, all those new objects or all the existing stuff that was on the previous phase. So that's a good little trick, important to know, you know, how you can quickly do that. Lost my mouse again. Again, setting up cameras and all that stuff in Revit. This is important. Why? Workflow again. Try teaching some, you know, intern architects and some other, I mean, everybody's savvy, you know, and can pick up the stuff in Max. But when I saw them set up cameras in Revit, they were like, boom, 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 they set up all their cameras, and then they would sit by my desk, okay, Greg, show me how to set these cameras up in Max. And I'm thinking, like, well, we already have the camera set up, and now we're just kind of redoing work, and it's much more difficult for them in Max because it's new tools, new ways of learning stuff, right? Reuse the knowledge you already have in your office. Let them set up the cameras. When we export to Max, the cameras will be there. Now here's that same room, and my grayscales with my override on it. I'll just quickly show you some of the render times that we're talking about and the differences. Here's another workflow. Like, why would we render this for 14 minutes when the one that for 50 seconds looks pretty much the same, telling us the same thing about the lighting, right? So there are a whole bunch of tools inside of Revit to control that quality. Part of those are some important tools are like when you're doing interior shots, you have to make sure that you force light through the windows. Okay, I did that, right? Tried to force light through the windows, but guess what? Still got a dark and scary corner back here in this rendering. Couldn't fix it even with all that. So now we've got a little issue, right? This person wanted a completely daylight lit shot. Not really possible with the tools in Revit and this design to bounce enough light from daylight only to get into that back area. It would have to be faked some way. You'd have to bring in some artificial light. Okay? So I stepped through that, and we started talking about it, and we bring in some artificial light, and now that back corner is not scary anymore. I had a render manager that used to say that all the time. Looks dark and scary back there, Greg. We got to put some more light in there. So again, it really, just so I'll pause on that just for a second. Again, 38 seconds is telling us all we need to know. No need to wait an hour and 17 minutes for the same exact, you know, pretty much rendering. At this stage, your client doesn't know the difference, right? We're talking walls, placement of furniture, things like that. Okay, let's get into how we get this thing in 3D Studio Max. Sorry. All this is just a chunk out of our larger workflow, okay? And this is just now saying, hey, we're just specifically now looking at Revit and Max and how we're going back and forth and what other types of tools we need. You see I've got some things, some loose, low-hanging fruit hanging out here like 3D vegetation. Ooh, that's a big one. I know if you've ever tried exterior renderings. So, you know, that's something that must be considered when you think of your workflow. How are you going to get trees and stuff? RPCs are not going to give you what you see in the magazines and all of that, and in these, you know, these beautiful renderings. You can't get those with, you know, RPCs, so you'll have to use other tools. Okay, here's a short one. How do we get from Revit into 3D Studio Max? Now, my mouse has kind of disappeared on me, but I think I can feel where this thing is. That's so weird. Do I see my mouse up there now? That's the weirdest thing ever. You know, there's always technical challenges, people. My mouse is gone. I don't think I can play this video because my mouse is gone. Yeah. No, it's okay. I'll do it live. Better. I'll do it live. I just saw it. It came back. So weird. Okay. Anyway, There's no sound here, so this is just, if you just look, I export, I overwrote export I already had as I exported as an FBX, which was right under our little, file button. Then I go into Max, I say link FBX. Now I'm going to go find that file that I saved on the network. There it is. I say attach. It'll give me different options to attach by material or component. I usually do material because that's what we're going to focus on here in Max. It's going to bring this model into Max with the cameras, all our materials that we set up in Revit. Now what I'm talking about here, or showing really here mostly, is how fast the lighting is. And I lied to Lana, that was one button. Okay, I told her I stretched the truth a little bit. But I'm just showing here that I'm turning the sun off, the sun and the sky. I have one skylight in there that has an HDR attached to it. I took a 360, it's a 360 HDR image that's attached to one little skylight. And here you see I'm going to grab this HDR image. I'm going to tell it that it needs to be spherical and encompass my whole scene, and that's automatically set up in Max. Here we don't use any exposure control. These are like camera settings. We don't use any of that because the lighting is taken from what? It's taken right from the image. If I wanted to make the image brighter, the rendering brighter, I'd make the image brighter. The cool thing is now you see the image in my background. So I can actually see the image that's going to light my model. So this, when you hear that lighting and all this stuff is very difficult, in this scenario, it's a cakewalk. It's a picture. This is how they do live action shots in movies when Transformers, when they're running down the street in New York, they just take 360 pictures of downtown New York and they light the robots with those photos. So we're using the same technology here, where you can go out to your job site, take 360 photos, map it onto this little sphere light that I have in the scene, and hit render. And in real time here, sort of, I get it's just a gray shaded model. Again, I'm just looking at lighting here and values of light. So you see on this side, it's the sun and the picture is on the other side of the picture, right? So as I'm lighting this and rendering it, it's kind of in shadow. So I'm going to start moving this model around, not very well. I've watched this video a couple of times, but don't worry about that. But eventually, I'm getting used to recording myself and all that stuff. This is like, again, low technology that I have lots of trouble with. But as you see, as I start to spin this model around to the sun side of the photograph, it's actually lighting the model from that photo, and I think I'll spin it around here in a second, and you'll see that it's on the sun side. Or I actually stopped. Did I stop right there? Yeah. So if I go back just a tiny bit, maybe I was talking and missed myself, but yeah, right around here, I spin and it lights on the sun side. So you see, the picture is totally lighting the model. And so that can be your site and your model. So what we do, if we can combine that, you'll see with, say, something like this, we can do the same thing. I think I did it on this shot for this model as well. So again, it's a very nice, cheap, inexpensive way to light your models very, very realistically without knowing a lot of tricks. Okay, sweet. So after you get that scene into Max, I'm going to go back. When we rendered in Revit, the screen went black for a second, right? So the thing is, Revit is just kind of automating a lot of things for you. And what it's automating behind that black screen is this. It's automating the lights bouncing around. So in these examples here, I took that same room, daylight only, And as the sun peers through those windows, I tell it how many thousands of bounces or photons should I shoot through this room. Easiest way to explain it, one of the developers of Mental Ray, it's a guy, Barton Galboy. I spoke to him many times in the past, and he would say, Greg, you know, global illumination is like taking one of those bouncy balls you had when you were a kid that bounce everywhere, and dip and pretend it's a spongy bouncy ball. You dip it in paint and bounce that thing around the wall, and everywhere it bounces, it leaves a little splotch of paint, or in this case, light. And the more it bounces, the less paint or light it leaves. So when we see these circles, I can control how big these circles are. And this is rendering in general. This is why I say like V-Ray or I-Ray or all these things, they're math. You know, so it's not that different. You know, I mean, of course, just like other companies, they promote themselves, but a lot of them use similar techniques of global illumination. Now the big thing is that these things are limited to bounces. So you see I'm calculating how many bounces I need. Come on, mousey mouse. Oh, let's go into a different view. Hold on. Let's see if that will help us. Let's spin back to where we were. So, and then I started adding more bounces. And then the end here, I was talking about these last two. I went up to 1.2 million, but I didn't need that many. I backed it back down to 120,000. I eventually turned on merged photons at 4 inches, which kind of smooths them all out. And in the end, I get a rendering like this in 5 minutes, which is a reasonable amount of time because why in Max? It's not locking up my process. I can send it on the network. 3D Studio Max has additional tools like Backburner, and we can help come in your office and set up Backburner across your whole network. I've been in firms with over 100 people, and we had it, the IT guy was my roommate, so we had it to when people walked away from their desk to get a drink of water, they'd start processing renderings. And it's, you know, as a Windows service, it knows like when the mouse or nothing has moved. As soon as it times out, it would just start processing renderings. Or if they went out to lunch. And so for a 100, 200 person firm, I mean, we were cranking out a lot of stuff because a lot of people go to lunch, you know, I mean, you have 200 machines at night. So, you know, that's the power of 3D Studio Max. You cannot do that in Revit. In Revit, it's rendering on one machine. In 3D Studio Max, if I had an animation, I could say send each frame to a different one of those 200 machines, or I can have up to a certain amount of processors work on one particular image. So if we have a rush and a client coming in, I could at lunchtime take all, well, not all 200. There's a limit, but I think it's maybe 64 processors or cores and have all those 64 cores work on one image. Again, I start changing settings. If, you know, when you get in some of my workshops, we get deep into how do you make these things faster and more efficient. It's down to 2 minutes. And notice the image doesn't change. Those are different images, but you can't, by your eye, you can't see the difference, you know. I don't have Wi-Fi. I don't think I have Wi-Fi. Again, low-tech. Wait, am I on my phone's Wi-Fi? Yes. I might have got some low-tech stuff right, guys. Let's check it out. Let's see. Let's see. I mean, I do have teenage daughters, so my phone game might be okay. They got me texting and all kinds of stuff these days. Here's one of the first cloud-based tools from Autodesk I want to show you. That same room, rendered in the cloud as an interactive, short little scene here. And so the cool thing about this scene is, you know, obviously you can move around in it interactively. And the other thing is that I think this is, you know, you have to kind of know what products do you want to deliver to your clients. There could be some reason that, you know, you guys use these things in-house, or your client wants to see something like that. Can we make it full screen? Maybe not. But the great thing is, organizationally, notice that when it rendered, it sent it to the A360 drive. And so that's great for, the whole team to be able to see this little interactive product, or, hey, I want to show you a design change we made, and everybody's kind of linked to the same information. Now, this is very interesting. That same room with the materials on, rendered locally on my workstation, 58 minutes. But there's something else I see there, though. I'm looking at that wood floor, and something just is a little unsettling about that. I went on the web earlier, and I got that wood texture, and I don't remember it looking exactly like it looks in that Revit scene. And it's the same scene. So let's do some investigating, guys. This is what I grabbed off the internet. Let's see if we can have all three up there at the same time. I think that should be big enough for you guys to see, and probably for me to explain what's happening. Look at what oh, this blew my mind, guys. This is where I get excited. This blew my mind. I go to an architect's office, and they say, hey, let's do a rendering. I do the rendering, and this is what I noticed after my 20 years of experience. That's not the texture I grabbed off the internet about 20 minutes ago. Something's not right. It's gamma. Inverse gamma, or gamma correction, is what Revit's not doing. And a lot of programs do, like 3D Studio Max, like the cloud did. Isn't that interesting? Same exact scene, same Revit file, rendered locally on my machine and sent to the cloud. The cloud really kicked its butt in all kinds of ways. 4 minutes, it applied the gamma correction so that my wood floor looks exactly like. Now, the thing that blew my mind was, I don't hear this in your community. I hear people talking, I'm trying to render, this would be the largest topic. How in the world can you get this rendering to look right? And people must be spinning their wheels like crazy. Max has it's built right into Max. It says gamma correction. It knows. Because this is just, I won't get too deep, but this is just a basic thing that all typical applications do with 8-bit JPEGs, Targas, whatever, TIFF files. They apply gamma to them because when they're recorded on your camera, your digital camera, they're recorded in a linear way. But since monitors display them differently, they would be too dark, so gamma is automatically applied. I'll just keep it very simple like that, okay? But for some reason, Revit did not take this into account, and the gamma is applied twice. So it's kind of like Windows applied an original gamma to this image, and Revit did it again. So that's something, the cloud can be your friend in many ways. I just want to say, though, that in your workflow, I would have to, if I was advising you, I never know what could happen in the cloud as far as timing. Like, what if we send it there and it just says, oh, you're in line somewhere? I don't know where I am in line. I can't make Autodesk make me go faster in line, So that's where GPUs, we still have to think about, just like kind of maybe your data and you have it saved somewhere on Carbonite or something. A lot of people still say, hey, I want a local hard drive of all my drawings. If the internet goes down, how am I going to, how will I get to Carbonite and get my backups? So that's important to think about. Oh, this is cool. All right, so I'm at my fun part at least. And this is where I really want to wrap up with you guys a little bit. This is, again, I spoke about the future. I have those cards sitting out there, and I talk about where renderings are going. I think this is where renderings are going. These are just some screenshots that I'm going to do a little live demo of right now. All right, let's see if we can break the machine. Okay. First of all, we do an active shade of this room. This is just some data I downloaded off the internet. I didn't really make this room. But if anybody's been, have any of you guys been involved in renderings in the past, done your own renderings? I see a show of hands. Oh, okay, yeah, lots of it. And some of old school, when it was taking days. Okay, in college, I used to leave that note on the computer in the lab, you know. Please don't touch this rendering. I have something due tomorrow. I was the first one to have a computer in my studio, and I remember everybody, 90 something. The whole studio stood around my desk and said, "Turn it on, man. Let's see it." It was a 486 something, and my professor said, "Your drawings are still due, the same time everybody else is. No excuses, you know, this and this and this. If you want to do this in AutoCAD, go for it, kid," you know. And I was the crazy guy that did. And so here, this is pretty cool. So back when we were doing those, a rendering like this with lighting bouncing all around and content would take hours. It's just a white room, but it would take hours and hours, maybe days, to render something like this. Now this thing is rendering in real time. Not only is it rendering in real time, we can do some pretty cool things with it for our clients, possibly in real time, or just to create images, a series of images before our client shows up. I took the easy one, wall color. Swap wall color. To finalize that rendering, it gets 100% in, I'd say, about 10 minutes. And it swaps colors this quickly. Now, can you imagine if I had the $15,000 worth of cards pushing this? When I hit that other color swatch, this thing would be finished rendering in probably a minute and a half. So I can go through a whole house. I could do a whole project like this for you, fully designed, fully furnished, all accessories, and I could walk through like a photographer, and I could give you renderings like that, 5 minutes apiece. And that it starts to tell your story, because see, we want to get past just the rendering. There's a story here that you're trying to tell in your meetings. We've got to get you to the point where we're using other products to put together short little videos or PowerPoints with telling the story of the render, right? Or the space. The renderings just help us tell the story, and we want to be able to do this kind of stuff as fast as possible. So, the camera view changed. It's no secret, of course, it's going to just do it in real time. If I can zoom in. Oh, my mouse really hates me today. I like to use the steering wheel. I pointed a lot of people to using the same tools in Revit when I teach the Macs. So something like the steering wheel. Come on, steering wheel. Something like the steering wheel. Oh, I'm in a camera view. I can't use the steering wheel. How about that? If I hit P for perspective, I can't use the steering wheel. And which is why it wasn't letting me zoom or anything either, because I was in a camera. But I can move around, and obviously this thing is trying to keep up. And you see it at that rate. I mean, and this is a laptop, you know? I mean, let's be honest. This is a laptop. It's a really nice laptop, but you probably would not be doing production work on a laptop, this type of production work. You would want, hopefully we could all afford box workstations and all those types of things, but not totally necessary. You know, I mean, I think these days, just to give you a little bit of information on your hardware, as you move into the future, I would put more resources into my video cards, the video gaming cards that all your kids are pushing, which is dropping the prices of those things like crazy. They're going to try to talk you into Quadro. I cannot say that you should use a certified piece of hardware, but if you are willing to, I think I can also advise you, if you do not have the finances to buy. Those cards are $5,000 a piece. You can buy, I've used other cards that are $800, $900, gaming cards by NVIDIA that are just as fast. So that's a huge difference in price point to be able to, again, you see this thing clearing up, right? As I move around, it's very grainy, but as long as I just let it sit for a few minutes, it's just going to get more and more clear. And it will get as clear as I can let it run and say, hey, run forever. It'll just keep calculating to the minutest detail. But like I said, after about 10 minutes, that thing's great enough. I just hit save and I move the camera and keep going. That's really the gist of what I wanted to show you. I wanted to end on that. To me, that's exciting from where I come from, you know, days of hours and hours of waiting for renderings. Oh gosh. I do want to end on, I have one more slide that I'd love to get to. My last slide is us. And this is my last slide. And because I've been working my production my whole life, and Bill was kind enough to offer me a transition into doing this type of work. I'm excited about doing this type of work because when I'm in a firm, you know, I mean, I think there's a lot of duality there of me being, you know, an intern and studying for the exam and doing renderings, and then advising on how we should do stuff also is another layer, and it became very complicated. And I feel that coming in from the outside now, without all the, you know, the production work, I can get, you know, the owner's time, and we can sit and talk about really, you know, where do we take this stuff. And so I really get excited because, again, I've been working production so much. I get excited about doing on-site training, over-the-web training. I get excited about custom workshops. I get real excited about that because in all these examples, we're using client data. So, you know, I'm not coming in and teaching you how to make a ball bounce in 3D Studio Max or how to build a chair, you know. I don't get as excited about that. There is a time and place for that, though. We may need to build a custom chandelier in-house someday, and so we offer those types of, you know, fundamental to advanced 3-day classes where I train you on all the minute stuff of 3D Studio Max to open up a whole new world to you. There's an importance to that. But a lot of times the most critical things to you are, I have a project that needs a rendering in like a month or a couple of weeks or a couple of days. And I've been doing that my whole life, you know. I mean, there's always the rush. And I'm used to the rush. I can handle the rush. I can handle, you know, all the snafus that happen, and you know, because it's going to happen, right? But I love doing that. I mean, we get really excited. And when I'm doing my workshops and my class, there's some high-fiving. I don't know if Bill has seen me do my touchdown dance down the corridor, you know. I know Amy has. Amy see it. They've seen it. And I get the people in my workshops excited about it too, because we're solving problems. And they're calling back to the office like, whoa, we have a whole new workflow, boss. Wait till we come back. Seriously, because that's what I get excited about, because time is money, you know, and all these things. And that's what I really want to debunk for you guys, you know. Like that's why I like those 2 kitchen images. Really both cool images, and I know lots of people see images all over the web, but there's a time and a cost to this stuff, right? It's easier to train your staff to get all the stuff into Revit if we use manufacturers, lights, furniture, all that stuff. Easier to build the scenes up more quickly, and then all we do is port to Max, add in a image to light the thing if it's an exterior, and if it's an interior, we use the light right from the manufacturer. Can't be wrong. I mean, it is exactly that fixture. You know, so if the materials were given the right reflectance and color values, that room is going to look exactly like that room is going to look in real life. Reach out to me, guys. I'm ready. I'm here, and I want to keep working. All right? I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.